Welcome to the Small Church Podcast, where faith, community, and ministry intersect in the unique context of smaller congregations. I'm your host, Tony Marr, and I'm thrilled to be joined by two men who are convinced they're a little bit more talented than I am.
That is right. I'm Robert Kill, one of those supposedly more talented guys, co-host and fellow small church leader. Together, we're here to explore the challenges, triumphs, and inspiring stories within the tight-knit communities that make up our smaller churches.
And I'm Bruce Montgomery, the one here to bring even more to the table than these two and offer a unique perspective to our conversation.
So whether you believe this talent hierarchy or not, you're in for a treat. If you're a pastor, a church member, or just curious about the world of leadership, you're in the right place.
Each episode, we dive into topics that matter to you, from innovative ministry ideas to navigating the unique dynamics of a smaller congregation.
So grab your cup of coffee, settle in, and let's journey together through the wonderful tapestry of small church life.
This is the Small Church Podcast.
All right, so we already have a controversy going on the Small Church Podcast, and we haven't even started recording yet. As our intro was playing, so my wonderful, amazing wife takes great care of me, and she supplies. I have a little candy dish on my desk where we record, and she supplies
A very
it
cool
with
wood
candy.
bowl. I mean, It's very nifty.
Yeah, handmade, I'm sure, in Indonesia. And several months ago on the show, Robert made the statement that you like grandma candies. You like the grandma candies that grandma has in her bowl.
I think you like, and by the way, I ended up grabbing one of your like Werthers. It's like it wasn't even in the wrapper. It's like it came straight out of some granddad's pocket. And it's like melting in your mouth, and it's like very weird. And so yes, but I like the strawberry with the little gooey stuff in the middle, and then the one candy that's almost impossible to find, but the Taco Bell cinnamon with the peppermint around
So you
them.
said this on the show. My wife is our one listener to the show. And she heard that, and she went and bought those candies for you. They sat in the bowl, and then they became like a melted, mungled, nasty mess. She was in here one day and went to get something out of the bowl and saw that, and she said, "Oh my gosh, what is this?" So that's the candy. She said, "This is disgusting." So she went and threw it away, cleaned the bowl, and went and bought fresh candy for the bowl for our show. Because, we are professional communicators, and the voice can get a little dry and raspy sometimes, and you need that lubrication while we are having our profound discussions on the Small Church Podcast. And so our intro is playing here, and you reach in to grab a piece of candy, and it's back to a sloppy, nasty mess.
I think we're going to have to forego the strawberry candies. I think that's what's...
I don't understand what's happening here, because we keep our house at a frigid temperature. And so it's not like they're melting in here, and yet it seems like they have all melted into one giant mass of a mess of grandma candy.
I've got nothing. Yeah, I mean, it's like I picked up one, and I think 14 pieces came out, and I'm holding it up, and you're looking at me like, what in the world is happening here? But we do only record once a week. I mean, I don't live here. And so I'm here once a week. And
are you trying to say that we turn our air conditioner off when you're not here?
No, I'm saying that bowl of candy probably gets touched really only once a week.
Yeah.
And so it's, you've got several windows in this room. I'm just going, we also got a lot of trees on the outside, but I'm just saying maybe the sun hits it a little bit. The strawberries should get eaten faster, and
I think we're going to ditch the grandma candies and just go back to the mints.
Go back to like peppermint.
You remember
cinnamon.
back in the day when we just had the mints,
Yeah.
the Lifesaver mint candies?
Peppermint, cinnamon. Those are good.
This has been a great start to the show.
I love it, man.
How are you doing?
I'm good. I was driving in today for the podcast, and we live in the country. You live more country than I do. But I live in town, in a city of 70,000 people, which again, compared to Atlanta, that's small, but
here we call it the country. A lot of our listeners, they would call it rural.
Yeah. And so but we have a bear that's running through our neighborhood. And stuff. Yeah.
I've seen it all over the Facebook.
It's just crazy. It's so funny. But I mean, we have coyotes. I mean, it's just, I was walking our dog a few weeks ago, and there was a deer standing across the street. But I was driving to your house today, and in the field I saw this turkey.
Did you see the turkeys? the herd of turkeys?
I was going to say a gobble. Is it a passel? I don't know.
I mean, it was a stampede coming across the road there when I was driving in this morning.
So it was only 3, but I saw the one, and then I look and I see on the right side, and I was a little ways away from. I was 100 yards away, but so I start slowing down, and there's like 2 more turkeys that come and they run across the street and they start looking at the fence, like where's the hole in the fence that I can go through. And then they found it, and they just, boogie on.
And
down
they were like
there.
a Sasquatch mated with a turkey. They were huge. I'd never seen a turkey that big.
They were big turkeys. And so, anyway, it's just fun, man. I mean, weather's starting to cool down. College football season. You and I are both NFL fans. I know a lot of people are kind of one way or the other. They tend to like NFL or college, and they don't like both. You and I both enjoy both of those sports. We have teams we pull for, and so it's a
good time to be alive right now.
Yeah.
We had
I'm in a hoodie. This is a great day.
We are recording. We'll give a little timestamp context, and I'm not sure exactly when this episode will record, but today is September 11th.
Yes.
September 11th, which means yesterday was September 10th. There was an event that happened last night that most of the world saw, that I don't want to spend too much time talking about, but if you happen to be on the news, we sat there and we watched this fight take place. Okay. People yelling and screaming at each other, and arguing for each other. And
took me a second. I'm sorry. I'm not very smart.
And I've got to tell you that they sit there, they yell and scream at each other for forever, and ultimately just throw words at each other, and no one ever says anything of substance. And at the end of it, you're just wondering what is going on. And of course, I'm talking about the dugout clearing brawl that happened in the Phillies game yesterday. And I am just sick of this. At least in hockey, they take off the gloves and throw down. In baseball, they all just run and scream at each other for a few minutes, and then they all just walk off the field, and nothing has ever happened. What is the point of the base clearing brawl in baseball? I don't understand the point of this thing.
So if they throw a punch, they get ejected. Hockey functions differently. And so hockey, it's mandated fighting. It's like a step below UFC or something. And so it's just such a different animal. Is there's these 5 minutes in the penalty box. I mean, so in baseball, pitcher, it buzzes at somebody's head, which I don't love the head thing, but I get the throwing at people. I think it's part of the game. It regulates the game, keeps people in check. You're going to crowd the plate. I get to throw at you. I mean, that's just life. But they're going to have to somehow, if they're going to actually say, okay, hey, go throw some punches. One, give them some more gear than what they've got on.
But you're even at the place now where you can't retaliate because the universal DH. So you brush someone back, you plunk someone as a pitcher, you can do it all you want because you know that there's not going to be any retaliation against you. They can't rush the mound anymore. They hit
your best. Typically, the Phillies, if the Phillies pitcher throws at somebody, they're going to hit Bryce Harper the next time he's up. And that's typically.
But the pitcher doesn't care. They're not wearing it.
Yeah. I mean, you had the American League though, and they didn't have. They've always had a DH, and
the American League is weak.
And so
we're both National League guys.
We are. I tell you, having Ozuna, it's been nice with the DH. And for you've got to feel the same way with Shohei. You got to think, could you imagine a guy that might win the MVP that would not have been allowed to play had there been no DH?
Might win the MVP?
Yeah.
Might win the MVP?
Might. He's a DH.
Come on, man.
He's a DH.
Come on.
He's a DH.
He has this wrapped up. He's going to be the first MVP from the designated hitter spot in the history of baseball.
I don't know. We'll see.
You thought that I was talking about the debate last night, the presidential debate. I saw the look on your face. You thought, I can't believe you're going here without talking to me.
No. I didn't care because I would have had about as much to say about both of them. I think that it's a step below the debate's a step below UFC. They need to give
pretty much the same thing.
They need to give them some
an hour of two people just screaming at each other, not making any sense or answering any questions. And at the end, you're like, what did we just witness here? That's pretty much it. Was pretty much the same thing as the fight in MLB baseball.
Yeah. So I think that if you're going to let baseball players fight, they've got to have a pitcher warmed up every inning, and then the pitcher has to sit for a certain number of batters, and that's how you. And then the hitter, whoever's involved as a fielder and stuff like that, they have to sit for a certain number of batters. And if somebody comes off the bench and causes problems, the other team gets to choose which player sits. So if somebody from the Phillies runs onto the field from the dugout and punches someone and there's a penalty, the Dodgers get to choose, we want to sit Bryce or Trey or, whoever. They get to choose whoever, or the Phillies get to look at the Dodgers and go, hey, we want Shohei out for 11 batters. So
I like it.
I mean, I'm just saying, let's make this fun.
I am starting a petition for Robert Kell to replace Rob Manfred as the commissioner of Major League Baseball.
So have I said on here, I think I did one time, this was probably 2008, 2009, and the Pirates were so bad. And they were firing their coach for the fourth time. And they weren't as bad apparently as who is it right now? Is it the White Sox right now?
The White Sox, yeah.
So bad. And so they were barely better than the White Sox, and it was 3 or 4 seasons in a row. And you've got guys like Andrew McCutchen. There's no way they should be this bad. So I tweeted out, come on, hey, at Pittsburgh Pirates, hire me to be your manager. I could do this for $200,000 a year. I'm going to save you millions. And literally, I could not do worse. You were the worst team in baseball for 4 straight years. I could not do worse. And so I'm going, this is it. I mean, what happens? You save a few million, you put that towards a better player, a better coach down the road, and then you fire me.
The Pittsburgh Pirates are the Mountain Christian Church of Major League Baseball. It seems like every person, every star pitcher on a roster started with Pittsburgh. Every pastor I talked to in the area, oh yeah, what's your story? Oh yeah, I started at Mountain.
Yeah, and I went to Milligan, transferred up to Mountain, and here I am. You're not wrong. So, hey, you mentioned something though on maybe a touch more somber note. I think that there's songs written about it. There's tons of movies that have come out. There's even a theater production called "Come From Away" that is absolutely beautiful about one of the planes that 9/11 and some things there. And everybody talks about, man, I remember where I was, standing, and I was standing in my parents' kitchen, happened to be, at their house, and was standing in their kitchen, and TV was on, and it was just well, this is weird, and this is weird. And then you realize this isn't a joke. This isn't something that's funny. And I mean, it's just, this is a real tragedy that's happening. And then, then you get both the towers and then DC and then another plane in a field and just a lot of things that started to happen really, really quickly. And I think it's good that we reflect back on these days. I think it's biblical when you look back at the fact of, Moses and them, they set these stones to remind them of these moments of God's goodness and faithfulness. And I understand for a lot of people, it's very hard to see goodness inside of what was there. But I do think for a lot of us, even you and I would never take that part out, but even if somebody is taking out the goodness of God, the faithfulness of God, and who he is in a really hard situation out of that.
So what do you remember from that day? Where were you? What were you going through?
Yeah,
what do you remember from that day?
I was at my parents' house. I was in a season of, I was in school. I wasn't vocationally in ministry. And I just remember standing around with people throughout the day and just being in some spaces where I'd be talking to some friends, and every space we walked into, whether it was a hardware store, a grocery store, it was in a small town, and a really small town, and just being there with friends and just standing in every place had a radio on or a TV on, and you're just watching this unfold. And it was just so weird, and it felt like a weird dream you couldn't wake up out of. What about you? Where were you at and things?
I was a 22-year-old kid that was the youth pastor at a church plant in Las Vegas. So we were 3,000 miles away. We were in the Pacific time zone. Woke up getting ready for work that morning, and we had just planted a church. I can remember having the news on that morning and seeing, because it was 3 hours ahead, and it was much earlier in the morning on the West Coast where I was at, that things had already unfolded. The majority of things had already unfolded. So when you flip on the news that morning, hadn't heard on anything, and everything was preempted. So everything was about what's happening in New York. And I can remember just sitting there and it not reflecting on me on what a big deal this was as a 22-year-old kid, until I walked into the church office that morning. And I walk in, my normal, happy, peppy 22-year-old youth pastor, and our office manager is sitting behind her desk, just weeping, absolutely weeping. And that's, I think, when it hit me, this is a big deal. And all of our staff were within our offices. As a church plant, we rented office space, and we had a large room that we would do like classes, and it's where we would do our Wednesday night student ministries events in this large room that had a big screen TV. And all of the staff that were already in the office, again, this is only like 8:00 in the morning, but it was 11:00 on the East Coast. So much had already unfolded.
Yeah, a lot had happened by them.
They're all sitting in there watching the TVs and the news reports of what's happening. And there was just this heavy, heavy, heavy weight that my 22-year-old self hadn't fully realized on my own. It took seeing what other people were going through for it to really hit me and impact me. And then I can remember all the discussions taking place, that most of the things for that weekend were already set. Our service was already planned, already orchestrated. Sermons had already been written. And then it was, what do we do as a new church? Do we talk about this? Do we not? And I can remember, as being the youngest person on the staff, just sitting and observing and soaking in the knowledge and the wisdom from the other guys on our team that were much more mature and had much greater understanding of the significance of what was happening. And it wasn't to them, it wasn't a do we, it was a how do we. And it was, we're starting from scratch now. We have a few days to get ready, because we are going to have hundreds of people coming in that we have probably never seen before, because they're looking for answers. We're going to have hundreds of people that are coming in broken and wounded and lost, hurting, and maybe for the first time in their life, maybe for the first time in years, turning to God for answers that they don't have because they don't know where else to turn. And how do we, in a couple of days, create an environment that honors everything that's just happened, all of the lives that were lost, that is respectful of all of the different emotions and questions that everyone has, and be a safe place to give answers of hope in times that seem like are completely hopeless. And it was a life-changing moment, even though I didn't have anybody that I was directly connected to that was there.
Yeah, I don't have anybody in my life that was directly there. I remember just, just as time went, you start to bump into people that would maybe be loosely connected or a little more intimately connected to someone who was in that space, who was in a building, who was on a plane, who was really heavily impacted by what happened in this time and in this moment. And I'm a few years older than you. So, 23 years ago, I guess I would have been 25, but, you're still pretty young and you're kind of sitting in this space and you're going, man, I remember watching it and it was happening so fresh and live for me. Like, I didn't wake up to here's everything that's happened. Yeah. I remember like something popped in and the first plane had hit the first tower. And then we're standing there and they're going, oh my goodness, it's happening again. and you're stepping into that space and you're looking and you're just watching, and then just things kind of continue to unfold. And so there was definitely this this tragicness and this bigness of what it was, because then, and cameras were nothing then like they are now. But I mean, even back then, it was just they could zoom in and they could do so much and they could see so many things. And they started showing all this stuff, and you just kind of go, wow, this is, because they were trying to keep things moving and showing more and more and more, because that's what news does. But yeah, it was tough. And so how did your church in that space, because I think there's you and I were in very different worlds. I mean, you're more West Coast. I was deep South, Bible Belt type of space. Same time, I was on the same time zone. You guys were getting it kind of delayed almost a little bit. I'm not delayed, but you weren't.
Yeah,
it wasn't like cell phones were buzzing
Sure.
and waking you up, going, "There's a national terror alert here that you need to be up and ready for." I don't think we approached it. I think that churches that what I remember, churches, there was prayer, there was, kind of silence, there was reflectiveness. So people changed sermons and did things like that. But I don't know that we felt the same heaviness of being a Bible Belt type of community in a really small town that, a town that's affectionately named Sin City, that West Coast, different mindset, not the Bible Belt, was kind of stepping in. Like, what did you all see? Did you really see a flood of people? I mean, did you see some people start to have some questions? And do you remember kind of how you guys approached that and what you did in those a little more intimately?
Yeah, I think that there was an immediate sense of fear where we were, because in Las Vegas, no one knew what was happening. Was this the start of World War III? Were we under attack everywhere? You're getting more and more reports. I think for you guys, it was happening in real time as you're seeing it. For us, so much had happened. And so it was, they've already attacked the Pentagon. They've already attacked, there was an attempt, they think, on the White House at the time with the plane that went down, and everything that's happened in New York City. Most people at that time, I don't know if it's still the case now, but most people thought if there was a terrorist attack, one of the first places that would happen would be Las Vegas, because of what Las Vegas stands for and the religious views of a lot of the militant groups that were active in the world at the time, and also the fact that the largest Air Force base in the United States, the hub for the stealth bomber and so many of our elite aircraft, is Nellis Air Force Base, which is in Las Vegas. And so there was this immediate fear of, are we next? Is Las Vegas going to be hit? Are we going to be on the attack? But even as that began to subside, then it was the reality of what has actually happened here, that our country will never be the same after this. Our community will never be the same. And because there's such a large military presence in Las Vegas because of Nellis Air Force Base, there was an immediate personal connection for so many people that we're now being faced with, what does this mean for our family and deployments and what's taking place within the aftermath of this. But just for the community as a whole, we saw a tremendous impact on the community, and the response that I was talking about before of people flooding into the church looking for answers, looking for some sort of hope, some sort of explanation, I guess, for what was happening here and what was going on. And it started that afternoon. People were coming into the offices for prayer. We held an immediate prayer vigil at the church that evening for people to come in, and had, I couldn't even begin to tell you the number of people that came into our small little church office just for a time of prayer and to get their thoughts out with other people that would pray for them, would talk with them, would comfort them. We saw over the course of the next week and leading into that Sunday, conversations with people that we'd never met before. And then that Sunday, I couldn't I couldn't give you an exact number, but it was a huge boom in attendance because people, again, were looking for answers. They were looking for some sort of comfort and solace in the midst of probably the most difficult thing that they had ever gone through in their lives. And I thought one of the things that was really amazing to me about this was the way that our country as a whole united in that period. And I look at, not to digress in the conversation, but to go back to last night and the presidential debate. And you look at all of the things that have happened in our country over the last several years, that our country is so divided. I think it's my opinion, probably as divided as it's been since the Civil War. And you look at that time period there where everyone, regardless of gender, everyone, regardless of race, everyone, regardless of political view, came together. They were proud to be an American. They felt like they were a part of something. And people who had never called on the name of God in their life now found themselves praying. They found themselves praying to a God that maybe they didn't even understand, but for the first time in their life, or maybe the first time in a long time, were seeking for a God that they had heard about. Maybe they had sought at one time in their life before, but people were coming in looking for the hope and peace that Jesus in John 14 says that only he can give, that the world can't give this kind of peace. And people were longing for that because their hearts hurt so much.
I was reflecting with some people, some leaders at church this past Sunday. We were just chatting right before people started showing up, and we were coming out of a week where a couple of school shootings, close to us in Kentucky. There was somebody just shooting people on the interstate, and that night before there'd actually been a shooting in the city where I live at like 2 a.m. or something like that. And there was just a lot of things, and we were just talking through some of that stuff. And the one thing that was tough, and I'm just kind of reflecting back to this, I'm interested to hear your thoughts, is like the school shooting that happened in Georgia. Melissa, my wife's from Georgia, and we had several friends which were starting to post on social media and like, hey, my spouse, my friend, my kids go to this school or in this school system, or, work at this school, work in this school system. And it's unfortunate that sometimes we don't feel as much empathy towards something if it doesn't impact us directly. But when it does, it doesn't mean we don't feel empathy, but when things impact us directly and we have people who are there, I remember Columbine, remember where I was, remember the church I was working at, I remember like what was going on when that first school shooting happened. And I remember that same kind of terror and fear of, is every school getting ready to go through a school shooting, and what's getting ready to happen? And of course, that was way far. I was in South Carolina at that point in time, and that was way, way, way far on the other side. I was closer to you all in that space. And so I remember sitting there though, and just talking through this and this, like the school shootings and the things, and just some stuff that was happening that had kind of rattled a few people. And we were talking through this past week, and thinking and looking and reflecting at this. Like, I guess one of the questions I would have is, maybe most churches do a really good job. I feel, or some churches, I don't know if I should say most, I don't know. But how do we take and reflect inside of things like this? And I'm not saying sit and lament in them to the point that we can't move forward, but how do we kind of hold to some like remembering and kind of reflecting and journeying and kind of having that intimacy in our heart of, hey, this impacted our life, and not just letting it be something that once a year the news reminds us and we go, oh, 9/11. Yeah. 9/11 is a unique thing because September 11th comes every year, and that date, and you look at your calendar, you go, oh, 9/11. And so we really marked that in a unique way. I mean, there's people who probably know the exact day, moment, and time that Columbine happened. I know the year ish, but I don't know that like that much. But I'm just, how do we kind of as a church, kind of look at these things and continue to be like a source for people. And maybe not even just that, but in remembering things that have happened, looking at things that are and could be happening. And how does the church, kind of prepare to be a space to have these conversations with gentleness and respect and to sit with people in those moments.
So I planted a church that I was the lead pastor at, and we had spent 8 months on the ground getting ready for this church plant, holding pre-launch meetings and all of this. And then we knew there are numerous studies by people far smarter than me, maybe even smarter than you, but probably not,
but we'll give them a shot,
that tell when the best time to launch a new church is. Okay. What season of the year is best and all
and the
this.
week after Labor Day is the one.
So it's actually true. And so we're looking at all of this. And so we knew when we wanted to plant. We knew when we wanted our launch Sunday to be. The problem was the perfect Sunday of the year. The community that we were launching in, the city that we were launching in, has their largest event of the year, where the entire city shuts down for a music festival.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. It's called Rhythm and Roots, and it is massive. It is huge. And so we knew we couldn't launch on Rhythm and Roots weekend. The very next weekend, the Sunday that we launched our church, was the 10-year anniversary of September 11th. We launched our church on September 11th, 2011. Okay. So it was the 10-year anniversary. And we thought, what do we do here? What do we do about this? We're doing something. We want this to be exciting. We want it to be, we're launching a new church. This needs to be a great time, but this is the 10-year anniversary of the most horrific day in the life of our country. How do we honor that and at the same time launch this thing on a positive note? And because of some people that we had that were a part of our launch team, we were able to bring the lieutenant governor of the state of Tennessee in and do our opening prayer and say a few little things. And we said, how amazing is it that on the day that we remember the most tragic loss of life in the history of our country, we are also celebrating the birth of something amazing that is going to expand the kingdom of God for eternity. And so I think as a church, we had a responsibility to remember what had happened there, but at the same time celebrate the work that was being done. And I think that the church has a unique opportunity to reflect and celebrate, because in all circumstances, be joyful. Isn't that what Scripture says? And I do think that the question you asked brings up an even deeper question. And we've touched on this with some things in the past on this show, but not directly related to circumstances like this, is what responsibility does the church have in global crises, national crises like this? If any, what responsibility does the church have? Because you said that in your remembrance of that day, you don't know that church has changed much, that anything happened.
Yeah, I don't know that a lot was a ton different. And again, I wasn't in leadership. I was doing other ministry type things that weren't vocational at a church, and so I probably showed up on a Sunday and did whatever I needed to do just to volunteer and serve and be a part. So,
but I think what we've seen throughout the course of human history is that when humanity experiences something devastating, even the ungodly turn towards God, because they don't know where else to turn. And you look at 200 years ago, the church was the hub of the community, culturally, socially, artistically. The church was placed in the center of the community, not out in the suburbs like we see so often now. And most of the major events within the community took place at the church. Most of your art took place at the church. Most of your community meetings, city hall meetings, and things like that took place at the church. The church was the center of the community. The church was where people went for refuge. The church was where people went for help. When war was breaking out, they would go to the church, was their shelter where they would go to. And I think that in many ways, we still see that now. When you see school shootings, when you see major events take place, oftentimes it's the local pastors that rally around and set people up. Oftentimes churches are places where people can come to get assistance, to get help, to seek refuge, and to hopefully begin to start the healing process. And so I think in many ways, even though our churches have often pulled themselves out of the center of the community and into the suburbs, when an ungodly community, and I don't want to say that as a blanket statement, but when ungodly people face crisis, they tend to turn and look for God. And I think the church needs to be prepared, equipped, and ready for those moments when they can step into the lives of hurting people that are desperate and questioning and searching and lost, and shine the light of the gospel, shine the light of Jesus to help guide them back to some sense of hope and peace and truth.
No, that's really good. I think that it's just such a hard kind of thing. I was thinking through as you were talking. I've got several friends and stuff who I don't think they're believers. I mean, it's in our conversations. They don't seem to value the things of Jesus and kind of leaning into that life and stuff. And so typically if people aren't a fan of Jesus, they're not much interested in God the Father either. So I think through, and there's a lot of this thing of prayers are nothing but just empty words by people who are trying to find a way to console you in a moment where they don't actually want to do anything. And while I disagree with that vehemently, because I believe that, prayers are this unbelievable resource that we have, probably a very underused resource by many followers of Jesus. I think that there's some reflection we have to do in that and go, okay, we're not going to step into this without prayer. But when the world is when people on the outside looking in are saying all you're doing is saying some empty words and you're not really putting your feet to the pavement and really getting in here and making a difference. And so globally, that's such a hard thing to start to process as a small church. Just being really transparent, as a small church, it's very hard to go, man, how do I help a situation that is globally happening? Sometimes even nationally, it's hard to look at something that's happening on a big scale nationally. At least in our country, I can start to go, okay, I see this is happening in the United States. How can I scale that to my state, my region, my county, my town? How can I start to scale these things down? And if you start to ask good questions with people who have an end goal that is to love people well, to meet them where they are, you can maybe start to kind of narrow that down. But the question really just starts to come is like, what's happening in your community? What's happening in that space? What seems to be the hurt, the hangups, the struggles, that you can look out and sit with people who care about that about your community, who maybe aren't even in your church. You talked about like churches used to be downtown. I mean, we've talked about my town a lot, and we bought
you guys literally are downtown.
Yeah, we bought a building that was right downtown, but you can stand at our front door and you can see First Christian, First Baptist, First Pres, and First Methodist. Literally, and these are actual big church buildings, not, we bought a storefront and remodeled it. But these are big church buildings that have been there for decades. And it's just such a big deal. And so maybe it's sitting with these who theologically we don't agree on everything, but what we all do agree on is that, the scriptures would say that we are to be the body of Christ that goes out and impacts and makes a difference in our community and our world. And, so what's the need? And the need in our space is probably going to be, I know it is, it's not probably, the need in our space in a town of 6,000 people, a county of 17,000 is going to be very, 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 very different than the needs of a 70,000 or 7 million person town or city or something like that.
It might be different in scope, but I don't know that it's different.
True.
In the needs
it's
of the
still,
people.
it's still, yeah, it's just and if you're in a bigger place, you probably have more people to do some of that ministry with. And so I think that's the thing for me is like when I hear people say some of these things of just this, we're tired of the empty words. And a lot of that right now that I'm seeing on social media in my feeds are coming from the school shootings and the things that have happened, and people are just making these comments, and unfortunately, I can do two things. I'm not a keyboard warrior, so I'm never going to comment inside of that. But I can either, when I see them, try to create some conversation, or I can pray. One, pray for the situation. Like I think it's absolutely terrible that kids and teachers and people are losing their lives in these moments. So praying for that situation, praying for the leadership, that they make the right decision. That honestly, I don't know that I'm smart enough to know what the right decision is. But then ultimately, I'm praying for a bridge, for a conversation with my friends that are in my social media feed, that are people that I know that I can sit with and I can have conversations about a loving God that I know that they don't always see as loving. But, we're teaching through Judges right now at church. And one of the things that's been really hard, because it is an absolutely violent, gory, bloody book. And I mean, it is rough. And sometimes people just go, how can God ordain? And it's like, God didn't ordain. Like, you have people who it says who aren't following God. And then you have the Israelites, who are God's chosen people, who have chosen, they had no king and everyone did what was right in their own eyes. You have everyone doing what was right. And so as God's working, like it's just people are doing, oh, God wants us to work. I'm going in to take care of this my way. And sometimes they do it, Michael Corleone, Godfather, gun behind the toilet style. And I don't, I think that there's these tensions of, we have to be willing to sit in and have some conversations and meet with people in a space where things are dark and hard and they don't have hope. And we've got to be willing, as Peter says, to do that with gentleness and respect and to journey through that space. So now I love what you all did. And as you were talking, I was just thinking about that because, like I said, my feed's been blowing up recently with a lot of just tired of the empty prayers of stupid Christians.
Yeah, yesterday was not only September 10th and the presidential debate and all of that, but it was also the 1-year anniversary of my daughter's car accident. That my teenage daughter was in a horrific traffic accident 1 year ago yesterday. And what you're saying reminded me of something, that in that moment that she had her accident and in the subsequent days that we were in the hospital and going through surgeries and all of that, she's doing great now. But in that, we heard from a lot of people. And one of my closest friends, dear friend, who is not a believer. In fact, we have had many conversations about the fact that he is not a believer. He sent me a text in those days that said, praying for you guys. And I remember reading that text and thinking, that's interesting that he said that he used that phrase, praying for you guys, with the conversations that we've had before. And several weeks later, as we were talking and we were having coffee, I actually said to him, hey, I want to ask you something. You sent me a text when Kenna had her accident that you were praying for her and for us. What did that mean for you? And for him, it prompted a conversation that we had there that led into some other things in his life that I wish that I could say that I baptized him 6 months ago and he's now on fire for the Lord. That's not the case. He actually, through him saying that comment, sending that text saying, I'm praying for you, and what that did in his heart and in his mind, it led him down a journey to where he wanted to go back to school to study to be a universalist priest. And that subsequently has died off and all of that. But it prompted some interesting conversations. But it made me think, as you said that with the empty prayers, that when people are faced with trials and they don't have answers for their own, they often look to a higher power for answers. And even someone that is outspoken against faith in the Christian concept, in that moment that wasn't even directly related to him, his response was, "I'm going to pray for you." And it was something that sparked a spiritual searching within his own soul that lasted for a while, and hopefully is still going on to this day, and my hope and prayer for him is that maybe even some of those little conversations that we had a year ago have continued to plant seeds and grow and fester and move within him to where someday that is a conversation that he and I have. And I can sit on these airwaves and said it led to life change, eternity changing decisions that he makes. But he sought after something to give him answers that he didn't have. And I think that the church needs to be prepared in those moments when our doors are opened to a group of people that without that tragedy, without those circumstances in life, maybe would never come in. And I think that it's something that the church, as church leaders, we need to be aware of at all times, because maybe, hopefully, prayerfully, we never have an instance like September 11th again in this country. But every single day, individual families and individual people are having their own September 11th. They're having something happen in their lives that is earth-shattering and life-changing. And maybe it's not dozens or hundreds of people that are coming into the doors of your church or searching your website or listening to a podcast looking for answers to the questions that are longing them and keeping them up at night. Maybe they're not flooding in, but is your church prepared? Are you prepared as a leader to answer questions, to be a support, to be a comfort, to give answers to people who are facing their own monumental tragedy in their life at a moment's notice?
Yeah, you were talking there. This probably isn't the best connection point, but you're talking about this praying and things. There was a song that came out a bunch of years ago called "Break Even" by The Script, and just literally the opening two lines are, "I'm still alive, but I'm barely breathing. Just prayed to a God that I don't believe in." And I just remember when I heard that song and processing through that and just thinking about that space, and this is very relationship song and stuff like that and hurt. But I mean, I think that when we hurt, and then the song just goes on, like, because when a heart breaks, it don't break even. And I think that, like, in that space, when our heart is broken, we're just trying to figure out how to mend it. We're just trying to figure out when our life is hurting, when things are upside down. And I think that I think most people will go to any extreme to get answer, to get hope, and to move forward. And if they feel like they've exhausted everything else and they have no idea, and they're sitting there in the darkness of the moment and they're alone and they've got nobody, they're going, prayer's better than nothing. And I would rather pray to a God that I don't believe in just in case than I would sit and do. And so I think that, not to try and end this on, I mean, I don't know that we're ending. We may talk for another hour. I doubt it, but I'm not trying to end this on some type of note like this, but I think that you've said this so well a couple of times in what you've been saying. I don't think we can just look at this as like, hey, these big events when this happens. You literally just said it's the daily, the in and out things, that there's people who are hurting, that their life feels very much at the end. I mean, it feels at the end of the rope. It feels like there's no hope. It feels like there's no opportunity. And when we get a chance to come alongside them, not as pastors, but as people who love Jesus and want to see others come to know him and that hope, that should inspire us to really be aware, excuse me, of the needs that we have in our community and the needs that the people have, so that we can prayerfully and actively, feet to pavement, go out and make a difference in their life.
What you just said, isn't that exactly 2 Corinthians 1?
I'm going to say
Exactly
yes,
2 Corinthians
since you're
1.
looking at it.
I'm looking at it. It says, "Praise be to God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive in God."
I'm very disappointed you didn't like Mac Powell the first couple lines of the thing. Third day, praise be the Lord. Yeah, you got to go through that whole thing. But
I'm not doing that.
you should have. No,
Nobody wants to hear me say it.
Yes, that is absolutely.
And shouldn't that be the mission of the church?
Mm.
To take the comfort, the hope, the peace that we have received through Jesus and give that to a community that's looking for the same thing.
Yes.
Good answer.
They don't call me the best. What is it? What football movie is that? They don't call him the best color guy for nothing. It's baseball. No, baseball. That was Major League. Euchre's leg. They don't call him the best color man for nothing, folks. And that's me. I'm just here to add a little color and spice to all your good thoughts.
I love it, man. Hey, this was a good discussion, and I know that we are not a live show here. So by the time that you're hearing this, it will no longer be September 11th, and this is something that we kind of sat in for a while here. We're coming up on 55 minutes, and this is not what we intended to be discussing today. And so we do want to thank you for bearing with us as we kind of process through some of this and take through some thoughts. And even though it's not 9/11 when you're listening to this right now, maybe it is, maybe it's next year that you're getting around to hearing this. Our hope is that this conversation that we've had has maybe sparked some thoughts and ideas in you as a leader in the local church or a leader in your community, that we have a responsibility as followers of Jesus to be a comfort to our community, to be a source, to be a resource for people that are hurting, people that are lost. It's what the church is there for. It's what we as leaders are there for, to lead people to Jesus in their times of hurt, in their times of worry, in their times of fear. And so let's, as a church, take the spirit, the way that we responded in the times of great international tragedy, and live that out every single day.
Agreed.
Man, you are
killing
on
it.
You're
killing it today.
Killing it today. All right. And that is all the time that we're going to have for this episode of the Small Church Podcast. I want to thank you for bearing with us as we struggled through that conversation today. And we invite you to be a part of our conversation. You can join us on Facebook or on our website, higherministries.com, and participate in the conversation. We would love to hear your thoughts. How did your church respond in those circumstances? How has your church and your leadership responded in other times of crisis? Maybe national, international, or just simply in your community or in the lives of your people. Please take a moment and like our podcast, share our podcast with whoever you listen to and talk with about podcasts, because we would love to get more people listening. If you would like more information on Higher Ministries and how you can be a part of what we're doing, again, you can tune in anytime on all of your favorite channels to listen to this podcast, or visit higherministries.com and find us at Higher Ministries on all of your favorite social media outlets. I want to thank you again for listening. On behalf of Robert Kell, I am Tony Marr. Have a great rest of your week.